Math-in-CTE is often misperceived as a curriculum. And one thing that we've learned through our research is that it is a process and a pedagogy. And the process involves extended professional development for teachers, and the pedagogy involves following a 7-element framework for teaching, and also for the development of the lessons. And I think the key for the success of this in terms of the teacher's point of view is that we're not asking them to replace what they teach. We're helping them to learn how to enhance the math that naturally occurs in what they teach. Math-in-CTE started as a research study, and that research took place between 2003 and 2005, and it was a simple research question. We wanted to investigate and find out that if CTE teachers learned to enhance the math that naturally occurs in the curriculum, would it make a difference in improving their students' mathematics skills? So that was the genesis of this project. Ultimately, we found out that the research was successful. The model was greatly successful in raising students' mathematics scores on standardized achievement tests. So we had a lot of people saying, what can you do to help us implement this in our schools and our districts and our states? So that was the birth of our Math-in-CTE technical assistance. So we now bring technical assistance to states who request the professional development for their teachers.
I got involved with the National Research Center because I did a lot of presenting for my school district at state and national conferences as part of my job assignment. On integrated academics, I had a partner that for probably 10 years we presented on English and mathematics, and typically where in the world are we going to use this and where does it apply in our life. The National Research Center asked me to come on the team when they began the math study. And I ended up running the math study in Michigan as part of the whole Math-in-CTE study. And in Michigan, we did health occupations. So I worked with the teachers in Michigan on health through the 2 years of the pilot and the full year implementation of the study. And when we finished with that, I continued on working with the center as a lead facilitator, working at various sites around the country as needed.
It's been an exciting ride. Once I'd gone to ACTE, and Jim Stone had presented the research around this Math-in-CTE project. And because I've always felt that career and technical education really offers a lot more than people were realizing. And this project had the data, it had the model, the professional development model that worked. And so I knew at that point I wanted to bring it to Oregon. Because I was there and our State Department wasn't there, I had to go back and talk with them about it, and they were supportive and supported starting the professional development at Lane Education Service District.
It had already been started in Lane in Lane County, Lane ESD Education Service District, and that was really something that was developed out of some. Kristen Gunson had gone to an ACTE conference, and she had decided this was something that needed to come to Oregon, had kind of twisted some arms at the National Center, trying to get a little bit of technical assistance on moving things forward. And so I think we were one of the first states to have a technical assistance program. Department of Education looked at that, thought that this was probably consistent with the things that were starting to happen in Perkins, and provided some additional funding so that they could actually move forward.
We looked at some ways that we could build capacity here in the district. So a part of the research that we came across was Math-in-CTE. We looked at the research base, and we knew we had to go with what had been proven to work. And so through the center and through how we are set up with academic integration teachers / coaches, I knew that if we could get them involved in this process, we would build capacity that would last in the district for years and years to come.
Some of the history that we had with the Math-in-CTE with Arlington Public Schools. A number of years ago, probably about 5 years ago, we started looking at integrating STEM education into our career and technical classes and in Arlington Public Schools. As we were doing that, we were able to get a grant through the Governor's Association to become a Governor's Career and Technical Academy. As we were looking through that, one of the things that we had to do with that grant is to integrate STEM. I was a tech ed supervisor at that time, and I saw an opportunity through the Association of Career and Technical Education, where they were offering the Jumpstart program to Math-in-CTE. So I talked to my director at that time, and I said, hey, this looks like a kind of an interesting program. And I remember seeing Dr. Jim Stone present at the American Youth Policy Forum a few years before that, talking about the program. And I thought, well, this might be a good way for us to take a look at and to see what it's about. So we formed 2 different teams, and we went to the Jumpstart program in Charlotte at that time. And what I really noticed about it was the teachers that we took with us, as soon as we got going on it, they were really into it, and they continued to stay into it. And I've never seen a staff development where teachers were so involved. And when I came back, I said, you know, this is really what we really need to do.
We often get the question when we go out in the field, what makes this model work? And I think the primary thing that we learned from our research and also from working with teachers in the field in our technical assistance is this notion of teachers working together. And what we found is that when the conditions are right, when we provide them the opportunity for extended professional development, when we provide them a good teaching framework to use, that common goal emerges, and thus a community of practice emerges as well. So teachers will tell us all the time that they really enjoy working with each other. The CTE teachers love working with each other. They share a content they love. But they also love working with those math teacher partners because those partners are helping them see mathematics in their curriculum that they had never seen before. But interestingly enough, we also get similar comments from math teachers who love to come to these sessions because they like the interactions with the CTE teacher. They gain lots of contextualized examples for teaching in their own classroom. And they also like to interact with the other math teachers. So this idea of community of practice is probably the strongest thing that emerged from our research in terms of what makes it work. If you can generate a community of practice, then you have teachers owning what they've developed and implementing this because they can see for themselves that it works.
Basically, the model is a 10-day model. We start with 5 days of intense professional development, typically in the summertime, but it doesn't have to be whenever it can fit. Typically, we start during the summer vacation with 5 days where we introduce the 7 elements. We curriculum map with the teachers so that the teachers know what they teach. Many times when you start out, teachers can tell you what textbook they use, they know what concepts are covered, but they really truly don't understand their full curriculum. So once we do curriculum mapping, it really opens things up for them so that they know then what they teach. And from those curriculum maps, we then choose the topics for their lessons that have mathematics in them that we can enhance for the students so that we can bring to the forefront the mathematics that they're already learning in their program. We don't at any time try to add anything more into their curriculum. We're only enhancing what is already there. So then during that 5 days, we have them each create a lesson, and they work with a math partner to create that lesson. So they're a team, a CTE math partner team. And they create that lesson, and they demonstrate that lesson to the group. And we'd have a critique process that we go through with them. We critique the lesson for any corrections, for anything that's missing or anything that is not clear. And so we have those lessons ready to go by the end of the week. Everyone goes home with all lessons. So if there are 20 teams in the group, then they go home with 20 lessons. Each teacher then is going to teach all 20 of those lessons throughout the course of the school year.
Beginning with the CTE curriculum and not beginning with the math. And I think as we do professional development that CTE teachers are very concerned that they're going to have to change their curriculum and become math teachers. So we start with the idea that we're going to help CTE teachers learn to teach differently, but we're not going to mess with their curriculum. We're going to help them learn how to enhance that curriculum, the math that naturally occurs in that curriculum. And we do that by starting there. So a lot of models that are out there will begin by superimposing math into a curricula. We start by mapping the math, systematically mapping the math that occurs there and bringing the math up out of the CTE curriculum. So that's how PD begins. We pair the CTE with their math teacher partners and we begin that mapping process.
So much of electricity has math components in it. It is mathematics derived. For electricians, knowing the power formula and Ohm's law, the two basic laws that govern electricity, are absolute necessities for the field. So in that regard, I've actually been teaching math since I've been teaching electricity.
I've been a teacher for 20 years, and I would say that the Math-in-CTE program was the best professional development I've experienced in those 20 years. Because Mr. Zawal and I actually team teach during the year, we focused a little more on the math, I think, than some of the other CTE teachers did. But what I really liked was that it was a hands-on, unlike so many other professional development experiences where you brought in, you sit, you listen, they tell you stuff. This was just the opposite. We actually did what you would, the folks from NCE modeled the very same things that we would want to do in the classroom. It was hands-on. We worked with our colleagues. We really got to internalize what we were being asked to learn, and we got to apply it, develop lessons that we could use in the classroom.
I used to think about math in a purely theoretical way. I just enjoyed the processes of math, and it didn't necessarily have to apply to anything. I just thought it was fun. And I hope that my students would also enjoy that, but I see that a lot of them really want to have real life connections made. They want to see, you know, what good is math in the real world? When will I ever use this? The age-old question really rings true for our students. So I began to think about the connections that the CTE curriculum offers. There are just so many technical aspects that are linked to algebra and geometry concepts. And so I really began to appreciate the richness of the CTE curriculum for its mathematical content. So I think that's made me think about how math teachers can create lesson plans that integrate more technical concepts. And now we have a vehicle to do that, since we have this model where they're paired with someone who has the authority in that area.
The 7 elements are really a framework that has been developed to help instructors make sure that the mathematics instruction stays contextualized in the CTE content, and that also that we assure the transfer of learning from the embedded math to the explicit math. This process begins with element 1, which is simply to introduce the lesson. Any good teacher introduces a CTE lesson as a CTE lesson. This is not a mathematics lesson. But in the introduction, we begin to hint at the math that's embedded. We then quickly move into element 2, which is to assess our students' math understanding. Now, this isn't an assessment like we think as a quiz or a test, but this is an instructional strategy that the teachers develop so they can identify what their students know about math and what their students don't know about mathematics as it relates to the CTE lesson that's upcoming. Then we move on to element 3. And element 3 is where the transfer of learning begins. Element 3 is a walkthrough of the math that naturally occurs in the CTE lesson. For instance, in a construction lesson, this would be something called a 3-4-5 that carpenters would use for building steps or building ramps. Then after the walkthrough of that embedded math, the naturally occurring math happens, we move into element 4, which offers other opportunities for students to think about how that mathematics is used in other contexts. For instance, a 3-4-5 that might be used for a stair building would then be expressed as the 3-4-5 that's used for building roof trusses. So then the student begins to see that that embedded math that was present in element 3 is also present in other places in the CTE world, in the real world. Then we move on to element 5, which is really unique to this model. That is where we stretch the student's learning to understand the explicit math that's embedded in that context. So that 3-4-5 becomes the Pythagorean theorem. And the instructor, by taking time to walk a student through element 3, 4, and 5, assures that transfer of learning from the embedded math to the traditional math or the explicit math that they might see in a mathematics classroom. Once we've assured that transfer of learning, then we do what all good teachers do, and that is we assess. So element 6 then offers the opportunity for students to demonstrate what they've learned, what they know and are able to do. So in the case of our construction example, students might actually go out and build the stairs. This is how they show their mathematics ability, and this is how they show their construction ability at the same time. We're not eliminating the CTE, we're adding in the mathematics, the demonstration of mathematics learning. After that student demonstration opportunity, then we have a formal assessment in the way of a test or a quiz or a unit exam. And this formal assessment might also be project-based projects, demonstrations, that sort of thing. So there you have the 7 elements. Now I might add on to the end of this that although we have them numbered as elements, they are not necessarily discrete. And the framework itself is open to interpretation by teachers, and they can apply their own unique teaching style to this depending on the unique learning styles of their students. So for instance, if a teacher was teaching a more student-directed way, they could change up those elements as long as they assure the transfer of learning that's present in 4, 5, and 6.
I think the 7 elements is good. It's a good format as far as, especially for somebody like me. I never had a whole lot of, being new at teaching, I never had a whole lot of experience creating lessons. So having this broken down into the 7 steps, I was able to, it was able to guide me through the process a little easier.
Coming from an engineering background, I've always had to believe that math and CTE were related. But to do it in an organized manner, I think that was facilitated by my experience with the whole CTE, Math-in-CTE model. I think the 7 elements, a conscious use of the 7 elements definitely should change the way any teacher think about mathematics and think about infusing things from the CTE area into their instructions.
I'm also math certified, so I'm a math teacher and a CTE. I'm a computer science teacher. So I don't know necessarily that I've had revelations about math, but what I did get out of this is that this is how math ought to be taught. What we tend to do, I mean, it's a shame what our math curriculum is so isolated from the real world. We give students a textbook, and I went back afterwards and looked at one of the textbooks we use, and it starts out with basically, here's a kind of problem. Now work, 20 of these. No reason why, no context, no connecting math to anything beyond this classroom. And in fact, our our teacher in the program mentioned how when years ago when she was asked, well, why do you take Algebra 1? And I don't know, it gets you ready for Algebra 2, was the best answer that she could come up with. And that's not what math is about. Math is a language that describes the world. It's connected to science, it's connected to automotive engineering, it's connected certainly to computer science. And to make those connections explicit is a wonderful thing to do. It will stop students from saying, why do I have to take this?
This idea of giving teachers the time they need to critique and provide feedback to one another. It's a very rare occurrence these days when teachers have the opportunity to really sit with one another and in a safe environment really provide each other with the feedback that's necessary to create quality instruction, quality lessons, quality materials. So our professional development is really a year-round experience. We start first in the summertime, usually with 5 days, and we try to give the teachers the basics in the model and help them begin that lesson development. But as the year progresses, we bring them back for 2 more days in the fall. We talk about what went well, what didn't go well. We talk about the kind of lesson refinements and revisions that are really necessary to improve the quality of their instruction and to help their students. And we do the same thing again in the spring. We bring them back for 2 more days. So that extended professional development over time is really a secret to the model.
As things started to make sense and I could make correlations between what I knew from the business world and experience, it became easier to make those connections. And as I did that, I really began to see the power of the model. But for me, and I still maintain this, the community of practice that has come about was almost a secondary event that maybe wasn't anticipated or expected, but it has truly become more powerful because the whole notion of rigor, relevance, and relationship makes a lot of sense to me. And I saw where our math partner brought the rigor, and we were able to bring the relevance, but the relationship has really blossomed into not just teacher-student, but teacher-teacher, teacher-administrator, administrator-student, so it involves the whole community.
For me, I think it helps me to help the CTE teacher more because I can say this is the appropriate way to introduce a lesson. This is the appropriate way to space out your lesson, that you have to have closure, you have to have an assessment, you have to have clearly written objectives. How are they going to be measurable? How are you going to assess the student to make sure that they gain the information that you wanted in the lesson? And I think, I'm pretty sure that has been very helpful with teachers as far as formal teaching, because a lot of our CTE teachers have never been in an education class.
What I found with the Math-in-CTE component, that I was actually able to enhance my instruction because I looked upon it strictly as practical math and you have to know it, but the Math-in-CTE component taught me to enhance it and to tie it into what's done in the classroom, so it becomes doubly relevant. They learn it in my class and they take what they've learned back in my class and see how it applies in theory, so they've seen both practical and theoretical applications. One of the biggest, to me, I guess I don't know if the word is gift or advantages in the Math-in-CTE program is it has actually made math much more friendly for my students and for me as well, because now I look upon it as an opportunity to really expand their math instruction, and that wouldn't have been possible without the component of being partnered with an actual math instructor. And I think that's been a big plus.
When we go out and interview teachers and talk to teachers, both at the end of the study, but also when we interview them during the technical assistance activities, we find that they love this model because it's doable in their classrooms. they see a direct benefit as they start to their students as they start to use this. One of the things that we heard recently from one of our visits is that the math teacher partners were noticing a difference in the ability of the students in their math classes. So it's very heartening to hear that the efforts that the CTE teachers are making in their classrooms are visible to the math teachers in their classrooms. So when a whole school or a whole district or a whole state go after this model, the teachers themselves begin to see the difference in the students. There's also something else that happens. It's anecdotal, that we don't have the statistical numbers to prove this, but we hear it time and time and time again. And that is that the teachers are observing that their students are gaining in their confidence with mathematics. They're seeing kids saying, I can do this. I can understand this. So there's something magic about those transfer of learning elements in the 7-element pedagogic framework, where when a CTE teacher has students in a classroom and they're in love with the CTE content, the kids are there because they love being there. They love that. But when that CTE teacher takes the time to extend their learning to understand the explicit math, something clicks for the students. And it's making a difference, not only anecdotally, but when people test this model, they will see a statistical difference in their students' abilities as well.
They're hooked from the beginning that they go through the training. I think they see the value in it. From my perspective too, and this is one of the things that I'm hearing from them as well, I think a trend in education right now is to kind of break these silos of this is where math is taught, this is where CTE is taught, this is where literacy is taught, and so on and so forth. But I think the biggest thing that our teachers are coming back with is like this pedagogy breaks those silos. And so now it's, hey, kids can learn math in all different venues, and CTE can actually cross over into the core academic and vice versa. And I think that's one of the main raves that our teachers are reporting back to us.
Some of the different changes that I've seen with our teachers as they've gotten into it, I do see that they can really see the connections, and they try to enhance those connections with the students on how the math is really an integral part of it. I see that the math teachers, when we first start working with them, they try to see where their connection and fit is, and I see that as they grow and we've had a number of our math teachers that have done this numerous years, they start seeing the connections that they can make in their own classes as well. And they are very, very supportive of our teachers, and that is their component, is to be the coach for our CTE teachers to make sure that they can make those math connections. It's very interesting when we sit in our countywide meetings, and that's when we get all of our career and technical education teachers together, and we start discussing math and CTE. And I really noticed that the teachers that have gone through this math and CTE really have a deep understanding of how it works and how it can enhance a student's knowledge. I don't see that in some of our other CTE teachers. They say, well, I already teach that, and maybe I don't need to go through the training. But I think once they go through the training, they really get a better feel for how this math, the connections that they can make, and the importance that they have in the students learning math.
The model is so very valuable, not only for the mathematics, but for the structure of the model. The teachers absolutely love the model and being able to implement the math and encourage their students with math. They all know the math is important in their program, and they really like the fact that we can encourage their students and help them make that transition, help them to understand the mathematics that is in that program. Because quite honestly, the end result for our kids is to get a job. And in order to get that job, they've got to understand the math that's needed. When I first began working in integrated academics many, many years ago, I had machine shop students who we sent out for job interviews, and they all failed the placement test. The first thing the employer did was give them a math test, and it was very basic mathematics. I actually went out to the employers and got a copy of their test. We started working with our students because we wanted to know what they were being asked. And that's when our kids realized that in order to get a job, they had to know the math.
I'm to a point in my career where I was getting discouraged, I think, because I would see kids in my classroom who couldn't do math, but I'd go out and I'd be in the wood shop and they could do math there. And why could they do that same thing in the wood shop, but they couldn't do it in my math classroom? And a lot of it is they just didn't see the connection. And so for me, I really, I wanted to be in that shop classroom. I mean, for me, ideally, I would love to be the math teacher who gives the skills just in time that they need in the shop classroom. And since I didn't have that opportunity, I actually had the opportunity to go the other way. I had the opportunity to work on my CTE endorsement in order to work in a pre-engineering classroom. And so I kind of jumped at that opportunity. And I had already done the math in CTE, and so now I'm on the other end. I'm working on the CTE in math.
Well, it has changed. It's changed. I think I see CTE in the core content area as not being distinct. I see that an interdisciplinary approach to instruction, both in the CTE classroom and in the math classroom, provides a better outlook for our students. Our students need to be engaged. Our students need to have instruction that is relevant to them, something that is meaningful, something they can connect with. Using the Math-in-CTE model brings relevance and brings some meaningful character to the instructions.
I have 2 kids on IEPs now that their counselor, so to speak, cannot believe that they are interested in the engineering things that we're doing now. Parents just rave about it because they made the application to math standards. Terminology is what did it for them. Otherwise they wouldn't have known. But they were so spooked about math before, they wouldn't come out and try to design in the program. So it's like I'm getting some good kids there that I wouldn't get any other way. They would avoid us because they figure you need to know math to do that. Yeah, or manipulate a computer. So that has been a huge lead into the process.
You're going to get a better prepared student. And some of these math skills are essential in CTE. They're not optional. And if you mess up the calculation, we have a great example in our construction trades. We actually lost a competition because the child did not calculate the slope of the roof correctly, though built the roof correctly. Once you get through a Math-in-CTE preparation as a teacher and you transfer that to the students, the Math-in-CTE model, they become rock solid on those math skills. And I think from that there's not only a confidence that they have, but a level of professionalism that the workplace just requires.
I fully feel that the pendulum has swung to create a rich environment where students can see the relevance of where they're going to go in the public, you know, whether it's continuing education or professional education. They're strictly, it's all high technical and critical thinking.
Math is, to me, math is all practice, and as long as you get more practice, you get better at it. So here we get to practice math and learn many other things, so it's a great way to get to know your math more.
They love it. They like the idea of I hate sitting there learning all the formulas, but I can come over here, I learn the same thing, but I actually put it to use. I actually understand when I get a torque wrench out, I can torque a tire. I understand how I get the torque. I understand what 75 foot-pounds is. I understand how to figure out the volume of an engine. Hydraulics, when we're doing brakes, I understand I apply 100 pounds of pressure to a 1-inch cylinder and it transfers up to 400 pounds to a 4-inch cylinder. So they understand that. They understand the concept of it. And it's a lot more fun. I mean, you're not only learning the math, but you get to get your hands dirty and you know, what else? You know, it's kind of like I get to have fun and tear things apart and learn math at the same time.
A lot of our math comes with measuring, as far as setting the tables, lining up the chairs, making sure the dishes aren't down too far. And we also learn things like when we're making menus, our prices on our menus, our buffet tickets, our buffet prices, whether it's adult or child or what kind of party it is. And we also learn things as far as like when we have to set like a coffee and tea, we have to make coffee, we have to know the measurements of the coffee, how much coffee to put in, how much water, how much tea, things like that. And when we do like lemon cuts, we have to know how to cut the lemons so that they'll fit on the glass and things like that. It's made it really easier for me to understand math because she breaks it down to a simpler form where I can apply it to any instance. So I just think of it as if I can apply it to food, I can apply it to real life. And she teaches us in a way that we understand. She goes over it with us. She sits us down and she helps us. And if we still don't understand, she'll go over it again or she'll apply it to something in real life that we can relate to.
It's really exciting to see the kids do the math. It's really exciting to bring it into the program. CTE classes for years and years have been more of a vocational, just hands-on, which is wonderful. I mean, I love teaching that part of it, but I also like giving them the opportunity to apply it, to see. The question I love is the students always ask, why do I have to learn this? Okay, this is why you have to learn it, because you're going to use it in real life. These are real life skills that you're going to use in this occupation, that occupation. These are things you really need to know. And to see them understand that is really exciting.
I think districts and states are interested in being involved in Math-in-CTE because they are looking for models that work. And this is the only evidence-based model that I know of for integration that has been tested and proven effective. I believe that they also like the notion that it provides extended professional development for their teachers that sustains the implementation. In our original study, we were challenged, once we had the successful findings, we were challenged to do a follow-up study. When we concluded the study, we left the schools, we left the teachers, no more professional development, no more support. And a year later, we went back to every teacher who would speak to us, every CTE teacher, every mathematics teacher involved in the study, to find out what was happening, how were they implementing the model, what were they doing with what they'd learned. And we found that over 75% of the CTE teachers were still implementing the model on their own without any professional development support from us. We found that the math teachers, surprisingly, were using, 66% of them were still using materials and examples in their classrooms that had been generated in the study. That was the big surprise. However, we found that the implementation rate for the control teachers was much lower. At the end of the study, we gave them about a day and a half of professional development, and we gave them all of the materials, all of the lesson plans that we had developed. And when we went back a year later, we found that their implementation rate was much lower, around 20 to 22%. We surmise that this is probably because they didn't have the advantage of the community of practice, which leads us back to that key core principle of communities of practice and the power of teachers working together to get this done. We had one teacher in the study who said it best. He said, "This experience has been something akin to the whole being greater than the sum of its parts." There's something special that happens. There's an extra power that happens when teachers come together in a community of practice around a central purpose. And that purpose is because they care about their students and they want to do something in the classroom that makes a change, a significant change for them. And this model does this.
For districts that are looking for not just a good academic technical integration professional development, but a good professional development in general that can be a template for a lot of professional development, I think you'd have a hard time beating the Math-in-CTE model. It is a tremendous professional development experience for your faculty. If a school district is thinking not only of improving their CTE instruction, but moving their academic instruction from siloed theoretical instruction to applied, team-oriented instruction, I think Math-in-CTE is the best model I know of.
My job as a STEM education specialist is to develop and implement integrative curricula largely through project-based learning and problem-based learning wherever I see opportunities. So you can imagine the Math-in-CTE model is a very comfortable fit for me. I think it could be for any school district. I think if you are looking at authentic assessments, teaching for meaning, and truly transformative experiences for both teachers and students, it's a wonderful process and worth every minute invested in planning and implementation.
We can start shining a CTE that we're not just the old shop out back. We're part of the education system, and we're an important part of the education system, and this gives us that credibility that we've never had.
I've been a passionate believer in integrative teaching for the longest time, so I was delighted right from the beginning. I just got excited. Wow, a chance to see mathematics in the content area, in context, to make it real. We should do a lot more of that in the classroom with students, and it would be effective both in helping students learn math and in making their CTE courses a vehicle for building skills.
I would like to thank you for your interest in Math-in-CTE. If you have more questions, we invite you to visit our website at nrccte.org. Thank you.